All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for this seminar today. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about an idea that has been meaningful to me. It's the idea behind how we can help students use devices as a way to improve their education. And I'll be talking about this idea a little bit more, but it's based off of a book that I found called Skim Surface by Joanna Cohn, who is an educator, collegiate educator. And she was trying to figure out a way to do this because she started realizing her students were using more and more devices, such as PDFs, ebooks, and other devices to do their readings for college. And so I wanted to do this seminar based off of the idea how we, as either parents or educators, can improve the students' access to these. Um, Improve not only access, but understanding of the devices to improve their learning. So, just a quick for those that are new to these seminars, I work for a company called Digital Respons-Ability. The seminar that is being presented is by this company. And we were founded back in 2016 by Carrie Rogers Whitehead. She's been pushing this initiative here in Utah and has been expanding this company throughout all of the United States and globally as well, trying to help use research based and prevention science frameworks to help students of all ages from kindergarten until ever to become better digital citizens. Um, There's responsibility. We work with students, educators, and parents. So all levels of a student's improvement to help them understand and be better with devices and technology. So in students, we do in-classroom presentations, helping them in the classroom. We work with educators and teach them how to become better with be better teachers for the students. And of course, teaching parents, such as seminars like this, to be able to help them become better consulters with their students, with their children. About me a little bit. I have an MA in teaching philosophy. I got that back in 2021. I taught high school for a number of years and have been teaching college for the last 4 years as well. Um, the idea that I am bringing up, as said before, is based off of Skim Surface by Janae Cohn. She started this idea. She started this book because she saw that students of all ages are using textbooks and other readings on devices instead of paper textbooks like we used when we were growing up. This is because the reason why she had come up with this book is because three main reasons. One, digital media is oftentimes more distracting. We get distracted by digital media. It's easier to be distracted by social media, by the news, by the latest game, and not want to be present in what we're researching. But on the other hand, digital media is so much easier to carry. I remember when I was a student and how many books I had to carry and how heavy it was versus my students now who have just one or two devices. And the main reason that Janae Cohn made this book was this is a skill that needs to be taught that no one is teaching. How do we teach students to read digital media versus paper? Because it is different due to the distractions that we can see on a digital media. It is a skill that needs to be taught and fostered. And so Janae Cohn made this book to help us figure out ways to make it better. Right? And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the data behind what is happening with digital media and the literacy skills that we need to have. Why I'm going to answer the question of why should we even care about teaching it instead of let's just stick with paper, which is a valid concern. I'm going to be answering that question. And then later, I'm going to talk about 5 skills that were brought up by Janae Cohn in her book that help students engage with digital media and all media of all ages, but especially in a digital media sphere to become better students while reading or consuming content that's online or on a device. Those 5 skills, I'll be going over these a number of times throughout the seminar today. It's curation, connection, creativity, contextualization, and contemplation. Those 5 skills are able to, if a student is able to cultivate those 5 skills, is going to become a much more successful student. And they're not skills that are taught. They're usually students are expected to know them when they get into college. And when they're in high school, most teachers are like, well, you'll learn it when you get to college. And that isn't helpful to the student whatsoever. But first, I want to talk about the data. I want to ask a quick survey of you participants, actually. What technology do you use the most to read? Do you read on paper books? Do you read using tablets, an ebook reader, your phone? Do you read on a laptop or on audiobooks? What is the one that you use the most to read? I do include audiobook because it is a new growing way of engaging with the content as well. And so as we can see with all of you, even though we might use paper books, we might use these other devices, we are more and more using electronic devices for our readings. We are using laptops, we are using phones, we're using ebook readers. These are things that are happening more and more often. With that being said, our students are as well. This trend is actually growing throughout all of the United States. And so here's some of the data from a survey done back in 2021, where 75% of adults, I have a comment here. I use the laptop much more at work, ebook for common domain works, etc. In other words, we are situational. Exactly, we are situational, and that's absolutely the case. But I was using this to show that it is growing to use devices instead of just paper, where we still have, with this survey, we can see that with the 75% of the adults that have said they've read a book over the last year, back in 2021, 32% still said they only read print books. But then 33% say they both read print and ebooks. 9 said they read only ebooks in any type of form, either laptop, phone, or ebook reader, etc. And then 23% of the response said they didn't read a book that year. And so this has been growing. This idea that only paper is becoming less and less common. More and more students are using electronic devices. And we are growing this. And we can see here that 66% of students back in 2021 used a mobile app to learn. Sorry for that typo. They're using mobile apps as part of their learning process. 99% of students in the US said they have a phone, and then 97% they have a laptop. And on average, the text of textbooks per semester is $600. And the reason, with all this data, the reason I'm showing it to you here is students will have a phone or a laptop most of the time. Not all students will have $600 to spend every semester. And so because of this, more and more students are opting for online sources instead of the paper textbooks. And so, with all of this data, it is showing a trend that we are moving towards digital media more and more. And that's why we do, as adults, need to teach our students and our children how to engage with this. And this is actually a very interesting fact that I found. In 2019, there was a study done of faculty members throughout the US that 83% of them agree that the cost of textbooks is too high. And so more and more students, myself included, we use PDFs, we use short chapters of books, we use open domain books, textbooks, to help lighten the load of our students. But all of those are online. All of those are digital forms, and it is a disservice to not help students understand how to use these new forms of learning. And so, because of this, more and more professors will be using articles or open source digital textbooks in the future, which means more and more students will be using that instead of paper from here on out. Right? And of course, there's a huge, terrible thing of like, oh no, we are losing out on this paper. It is a very normal reaction. It's a very common reaction. For example, there is so many different fears over technology in learning. I've had different people, different professors, different students tell me these fears, and I found them online as well. One big fear is technology actually helps us forget info, right? I mean, for example, how many phone numbers do we have memorized versus 20 years ago, now versus 20 years ago? I remember 20 years ago, I had all of my friends' numbers memorized. I had my family members' numbers, my family member numbers memorized. Sorry about that. And now I remember my wife's, and that's pretty much it. Because the rest are saved on my phone. And this is because we're able to put it down on paper or in technology, we don't have to remember it anymore. Another fear of technology is note taking. There's a lot of studies that show that handwritten notes help us remember information more. But because this is supposed to help us connect information to us, and one of the explanations of why handwritten notes help us better than digital taken notes, like on a phone or a laptop, is students were taught how to take notes on paper more effectively than taking notes on a computer. So while taking notes on a computer, they're writing down every single word and they're not able to capture everything. But while writing in hand, they're able to capture the information that's important and write down those bits to keep those bits of information longer. You're only that was said in any lecture or any class period. And then the last fear is technology is distracting. As I said before, I know how often I click Alt Tab on my laptop or computer to switch to a different tab on my browser, to switch to a different program, to like go to a different social media. It is a very common thing that we've started doing as people online. It's so easy to switch from app to app to app to app, go from web page to web page to web page, and it is distracting. And so we try and find things that will distract us, anything else. And these fears are common, these fears are understandable, and it's not new. So, quick story time. As I said, I have my MA in teaching philosophy, so I love one of my greatest loves is Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. He lived back in the 3rd century BCE, and we have so much information about this man, but he actually never wrote anything. We don't have a single word of his written. All of the ideas and thoughts of Socrates that we have today is because his student Plato wrote books and dialogues about Socrates' ideas and thoughts and words, but he never wrote anything down. There's a dialogue called the Phaedrus. In the Phaedrus, He's talking to Socrates is talking to Phaedrus and talks about how the written word, because at this time the written word is something brand new, like the past 50 years. Greece was actually getting a written language, and Socrates didn't like it. Socrates didn't like the idea that people would write things down and forget instead of using the oral tradition that he grew up with. The same fear we have with technology today. He was also afraid that it put ideas in stasis, that if I write something down, it will be there forever. And what if I change my mind later? I mean, this is the exact reason why people dislike Twitter or other social media. Is like, I wrote something 10 years ago, doesn't mean I believe it now, right? These are the exact fears that Socrates had thousands of years ago, over 2 millennia. And he had that same fear, but we can see that the written word has actually helped us. So, with all of that, with the data and trying to assuage these fears that we might have, we can see that there is a need to learn these skills and to teach our students these skills of using technology instead of running away from it, like I was taught when I was in doing my bachelor's, but improve and help them know how to use these skills. And so this is a quote by a Ziming Liu. He says, printed media and digital media have their own advantages and limitations. The challenge is to determine the applicability of a particular medium in a given context or process. In other words, like Jeff said in the chat, it is dependent on the situation of what one has the benefit or not. Instead of being afraid of embracing technology, using it with our students will help them understand when to and when to not. And that is where this idea, skim, surface, repeat, goes. And like I said before, ebooks are on the rise. They're going to continue on the rise because there are so many reasons that ebooks will be better for students in the long run. Cheaper, updates to texts can happen instantaneously. So you don't have to buy a new book every year. And then, of course, ease of access. It's so much easier to carry around your computer and your phone instead of 10 textbooks and throwing out your back. And so these are the 5 skills that Dr. Cohn says we can help students use to better engage with digital media. The 5 are curation, connection, creativity, contextualization, and contemplation. Like Leo says, how we engage matters just as much as what we engage. How we're engaging with the material is just as important as are we doing it in digital or paper. And so to begin, it's with curation, the first skill that she talks about. Hold on. So curation, the idea behind curation is you collect resources, bring them together, and you're able to create new knowledge with this gathering of resources. If we teach this skill of curation to students, it helps them make mindful choices of what to read that will help them understand differences of different texts. In other words, we can curate on digital media. There are different ways that we can do this we can copy and paste different parts of articles, put them into a new document that we can use to help us make new ideas. I'm not saying plagiarize. I'm saying be able to make word clouds or be able to copy and paste big chunks and put it into a new document to be able to read all of these different ideas to help us as the student see what is really being said throughout all of these different ideas. We can copy links and names of articles instead of having to write them down and making these big resource guides by hand and then having to go and find them over again in the library and take all that time. We can use digital media as a benefit, we can save these links of the URLs. We can save the names of articles. We can save these ideas in this resource guide that we can then engage with. Students can look up like, hey, I remember I was talking about this idea back in class last semester. I read this book back my senior year of high school. I can take all of these names. I can take all of these and make a resource guide that's clickable. I can just go to the resource guide, click on the name, and it brings me to a website that I remember looking at before, instead of having to spend the time opening up the paper and then going to the library and finding the book. Being able to use these resources saves us time and helps us curate lists that brings new ideas to the forefront. And then lastly, we can see how these combined ideas, these combined bits and pieces, this lists that we've curated to make new ideas. Dr. Cohn wrote that by encouraging students to engage in acts of curation, we help them recognize which pieces from readings are memorable, unique, and applicable for reading or learning. Everything we read has bits and pieces that are good and bits and pieces that aren't so good. If there was just one book that all of it was perfect and everything was great in it, we wouldn't have more books. We just read that one book over and over and over again. But we have this idea that every book has good in it. Every text and article and video has bits and pieces that are good. If we encourage the students to engage in this curation, they can remember the bits and pieces. They can see what's memorable in this text A versus chapter B. What is unique to this thinker that is unique to that thinker. And it will help them in the learning process. The second skill is connection. This is one of my favorite ones because it is the one that brought me into academia to begin with. I was able to have a really good professor that helped me see connections and see how ideas from this class over here and that class over there, and how all these different books and texts and articles and movies, how they were all part of a dialogue. Because whenever we read a book, whenever we read an article, it's not happening in a vacuum. Every single thing that we read and talk about. When we're able to connect and make bridges to ideas that we have seen in different areas, either lived or read, we can make new ideas. So some of the ways that we can make connections that is unique to digital space is by using search features in web browsers, PDF readers, and other programs. We can take an article that we read before, take a page on a website and like, hey, I remember talking about this idea. I remember talking about this concept that I had read years ago. And go and you can, instead of having to skim the entire catalog for a single word or an idea, you can just use the search feature and find this is where it was said and then make a connection between A or B. As Jeff said, I wasn't able to read all of that. Yeah, and it's like it's impossible to curate all ideas, but we were able to make connections for what are important to us. Thank you for that, Jeff. I just recently saw that, sorry. And then so using search features helps us connect these ideas that we've seen or read in other places. Another way that we can use digital media to help us make connections is we can make folders on our desktops. We can make folders on our web browsers. We can make folders and then collect all of these ideas that are similar. So we can like, okay, I really want to talk about this one idea. Let's say our students are really interested in natural disasters. They can put all of the articles of natural disasters and how they are or not connected. If a student is really interested in the history of slavery of the world, they can make the connections and put these things together. And that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that, Kristen. So, tab groups on Firefox and Chrome, I don't know about others. Those are the two that I'm most similar with, especially on a computer. You can just right click on the tab, and when you go down, it will say new tab group or add to new tab group or add to new group. And when you do that, um, you're able to then take all the tabs that are of that same idea and you're able to slide it over into that group. And how it will work is there's going to be this huge big bar of all these different tabs. And then you click the name of the group and it shrinks it down and it has the name of the group that you made. On my computer, I have tabs for from everything from articles that I'm working on to interesting news stories that I find fascinating to um, funny comics I'm sharing with family or to anything that like is able to be a single idea and you're able to connect those multiple tabs into a group to be able to look at them and organize them in a better way. Um, you can also add hyperlinks to websites or add hyperlinks. Symbaloo, that yeah, it's a really good one. I'm actually gonna be talking about that at the end. I have a big list of tools that was and Cone had brought together, but this is a really good one as well. Yeah, thank you for Helena. Um, all of these ways we can make connections. We can show the connections because what we're talking about is never in a vacuum. What we're reading is never by itself. When one person is talking about something, it was talked about before by someone else. We can see these connections. We can see how what we read is in dialogue with other ideas. We can see how this movie is responding to that play by Orson Orson Wilder. We can talk about how this person is responding to a poem that was written by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, the Mexican poet. And these all can help us and the students see that they are part of the connection, the dialogue as well, which brings us to creativity. Creativity, of course, is the ability to make something new from the knowledge that we get from reading. Not just that, there's creativity in other ways, of course. But in this context, we can help students realize that they can be part of the dialogue. They can bring their own ideas into the conversation that they're reading about. So while they're curating lists, making connections, they can realize I can be part of the conversation. I belong in the dialogue, which is a huge skill that we don't always tell our students. I've had plenty of students tell me, like, I don't belong on the page or some variation of this. I don't, my words are not going to be important enough in this conversation. And that really is heartbreaking for them to say because, of course, their ideas matter. Of course, their ideas belong in the conversation. Otherwise, why read? Their ideas are part of it, and being able to help them cultivate creativity will help them realize they do belong in the dialogue. Um, as I said, it doesn't have to be art per se, it can be. I've seen students at multiple different ways respond to a dialogue by making pictures or making a sculpture, making a play. But creativity is also just any independent thought. They're able to be, if it is their independent thought, they are creating. And that is them being part of the dialogue. Being able to present old ways, ideas in a new medium or way that maybe had been discussed before, but at least it's something new. Um, and students can go beyond text with digital media. And like you can make creativity with videos, see how music and images and All these different ideas have come together, and they can make their own step forward in the dialogue by responding to videos, by responding to music. Video blogs on YouTube are huge, podcasts, making their own music and presenting it on a myriad of websites, and being able to show their creativity to show that they are part of the conversation, the dialogue. Um, and being able to add all these different ideas from so many different mediums will help students realize they can make their own creative additions. Um, for me, this is important because for most of my life, I was labeled as non-creative. I was told I'm not creative, I'm not a creative type. I was too literal thinking all these different ideas until I was working with a teacher. And I wrote a essay for a class, and the teacher was like, "Hey, that was a really creative idea that you brought up." And over time, I've been able to see that these ideas, my dialogue, my conversation, is creative. I'm being creative because I'm bringing new ideas to the table, or at least old ideas in a new way, right? Other people might have talked about it before, but I'm adding myself to the dialogue, and that is creativity in and of itself. It doesn't have to be um, the most famous. Uh, they don't have to be the most famous influence. They don't have to be the most famous person in a certain type of creativity. By creating or presenting their ideas in a new way, it is being creative. And Cohen has this other quote: by encouraging students to engage in acts of creativity, we help them understand that reading compels acts of writing and problem solving, and that readings do not exist in a vacuum. Rather, they are intended to inspire further creative thinking. By encouraging these students, they can see that putting their own words into the conversation is creative thinking on their parts. Which brings us to contextualization. This skill is being able to understand the text's literal meaning and why the text or the ideas were made in the way that they were. Um, so, having more tools in digital media helps students understand contextualization way better. We can search and discover history of works, and they can help open new meanings to the text that we're reading. Two examples that I have is one of my favorite is Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. This is of course, the famous poem that goes, I was walking in the woods, I saw two paths before me, and then he describes the two paths, and then he decides to take the road. He decides to take the one less traveled by. To give a little bit of context to this, I have the citation at the end of this if you are interested in looking this up. Robert Frost wrote this poem as a response to one of his good friends, who him and Robert Frost would go on daily walks through the woods. And his friend, who was also a poet, Thomas Jordan, no, can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm very sorry about that. The friend would oftentimes um, not be able to decide which path to go on while they're walking through the woods. And when they did decide, his Robert Frost's friend would always be so sad that they didn't choose the other path. Well, what if the other path was just prettier? What if the other path was just better? And so the road not taken was a joke about his friend. Now, that doesn't mean that we take away all of the impact that this wonderful poem has given to the world, because people can take from anything what they will. Because again, we are part of the dialogue. But being able to understand the context of Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken helps us understand, well, maybe it's not just an anthem for the path not trodden by others, by breaking out of the norm and not following what others do, maybe blazing your own trail. That is what people have taken from it. That is a beautiful meaning, but it can also mean something else to us because we understand the context. Another example is the song Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my lord. And for most of my life, I was taught that that was a hippie song of unity and love and bringing together in the 60s and everything because that's what it was talked about. Oftentimes we see it in the news if somebody's talking about a politician or a news anchor or some other talking head that we see. Whenever they talk about kumbaya, they talk about bringing peace and um, celebration of love and kindness. But kumbaya actually is Galagichi, which is um, a language from the Gullah people in South Carolina that says "come by here" in English. So kumbaya means "come by here, my lord." It was a liberation song. It was a song sung by the slaves of the South Carolina to talk about when they could be free. Um, and so being able to understand that context of the kumbaya doesn't take away the meaning that, yes, a lot of people use it for this peaceful love, but also realize that these people have used the idea of kumbaya as a slave freedom song, as a way to take an action to liberate ourselves through their beliefs. And it brings new understanding to the text. And I would not have been able to do the research for these simple things if I did not have the digital media. Well, I would have been able to, but it would take me a lot longer. I was able to look at videos and articles very quickly by understanding the context of, well, why did this person write this? Why did Robert Frost write this poem? Why? How is Kumbaya taken in this idea? And so being able to contextualize other writing helps students practice the ability of understanding the context of their own thoughts. This is the reason I think contextualization is so important. It's not just for the idea that we can understand where they're coming from, but if we practice this skill and we help students practice the skill, they can then describe why is it important to them to write what they're writing. Oftentimes it's to fulfill an assignment. I understand that. But if they practice the skill often enough, they can see, well, yes, it's for an assignment, but this means something to me. This idea that I created means something to me in a certain way. And so being able to understand these other contexts can tell them themselves, maybe the poem I just wrote means nothing. Or maybe there's something deeper in that that I want to show more to the world. And it helps them become more engaged with their writing. And then the last skill that Cohn brings up is contemplation. This is, I think, the most important of the five skills to help our students understand, but it's so hard to implement. Contemplation is easy to define, hard to implement, as I wrote here. Why am I reading this? What is the reason behind this text that I'm reading for class? Why is it important that I'm reading Socrates or Plato? Why is it important that I'm reading Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken? Being able to contemplate these ideas will help them so much. Here's some of the reasons how. Um, well, one of the reasons why it's so important is, as I said before, the digital space is so distracting. But if we're able to help students contemplate, like, why am I reading this text? What dialogue is it creating? What information am I getting out of this? How can I use it creatively later? Bringing all of these skills together in contemplation, the why helps them in three main ways. There's evidence out there to help say if we're going to use a device and we do so purposefully or with purpose, I know I'm skipping, with purpose, it is easier to stay on task with what we're doing. If I pick up my phone just as a distraction, there's more likely that I'm going to open up social media versus I need to pick my phone to do this reading. I will most likely be able to stay on the reading instead of go to social media if I'm doing it for a purpose and remind myself of that purpose. And then brings us to the idea of being mindful of these possible distractions. When you're doing the reading, you're like, I'm opening my phone to do this reading for class. I'm going to set my time for it. You can then be mindful, like, yeah, and maybe I'm going to skip over to social media for whatever it is that I'm looking at the time. Maybe I'm going to skip over to this other idea. But if you're being mindful of it, you can more likely realize, oh, I just skipped over to YouTube, or I just skipped over to TikTok, I just skipped over to Snapchat. You can be like, nope, this is not what I was doing right now. Reminding yourself what your purpose was, which then brings up having that why, having the why be clear of like, I'm reading this because I want to understand this concept. I'm reading the why because it'll help me understand the dialogue that's happening. Then, well, having that why be clear before a student reads something will make them be able to be more purposeful, and be mindful of these possible distractions as well. Like I said, it's so important to have, and having contemplation helps them develop insights into the best practices, helps them focus, helps them engage the digital media, because as we showed before, it's going to keep happening. Social media is going to be on the rise, or not so, digital media is going to be on the rise. And if we teach them these 5 skills, they will be able to improve. And so here is a list of digital tools to help. Um, I know that you can't write all these down. There's going to be a lot. So how I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about some of the base ones right now, some of the digital tools that can help with these problems. And all of these links will be found on the blog that's going to be posted a little bit later today. We had a bit of technical difficulties, but they will be posted a little bit later today. And you'll be able to see all of these tools and click on them and go through them on the blog itself. But there are so many digital tools out there. As you can see, like one of the worst things for me before I found, I am pretty sure the blog will be sent out. Chelsea, she's the admin. She'll be able to answer that in a bit. Yeah. So as Carrie said, sorry, the blog will be sent out. And all of these will be there. I have on there if they're free, if they're freemium, so like they're free for a little bit, but then you have to pay afterwards to use all the really cool features. And you can pick and choose which ones are important to you. And I have them listed here of the tools that they can be, and then what they're used for throughout the whole thing. And so one of the most annoying things is if you have a PDF, like being able to make notes on it, be able to like circle things or highlight is super difficult sometimes. And so there are some PDF annotation tools like Foxit Reader is really nice. I like it. I use it all the time when I'm doing my readings because it is so easy to use. It doesn't have all the really fancy gadget as Adobe Acrobat Reader, but I'm also not rich enough to have like the $50 a month or whatever the premium features are. And so I like Foxit because it has that base simple thing that I like. And so there's all of these different ways that we can use PDF or make notes on the PDFs that we have. The social annotation tool is ways that you can use uh, like it's social as in you're able to communicate with other people on the app or the be able to like you have the PDF and then you as a group can make notes and comment on each other, which is very similar to a collaborative document tool. So this is really helpful for students who are working on a group project. And the same with collaborative document composing, where they're able to make a document together to where they can make notes together. I use Google Docs often in my class. Like at the beginning of the semester, I have them create their own digital their rules surrounding digital use in the classroom. Like, are they allowed to use computers whenever, wherever? All right. And so after class, they together make notes and communicate on a Google Doc. um, to be able to make the rules that they will all follow throughout the semester about digital use in the classroom. Outside the classroom, they are able to use whatever digital media they want, but they can make a decision. Do we want to be using phones in class or not? Do we want to be using computers in class or not? Is there a limit to how much we use or not? And it's a really cool way that they can collaborate on a document. And then there's these other ones as well, MediaWiki and Etherpad as well. Um, Tools for improving accessibility. These are great. Um, Especially for those that need accessibility, for those who have dyslexia, sight issues, whatever accessibility they have that is hindering them from reading a text. These are great to use as a teacher or as a parent or as a student as well. Um, Ways that you can bookmark or curate content. These are some really great apps here. And again, all these links will be found in the blog that's going to be sent out a little bit later today. Again, sorry for the, um, thank you for your patience on getting that sent out. And then you can use these to be able to make your own citation like page, works cited page, and like do all your resources. You take the URL from this and you put it in and it saves that citation for you. You can journal off of these. Evernote, I've heard really good things from where you can journal and like take notes of like, these are all the ideas here. These are all the ideas here. And you can connect from class to class and also subsection to subsection in each one. Yeah, so the slideware, so like slides like Canva, like Google Slides, PowerPoint, all of these ones that are most talked about. I've usually used Google Slides. It's not as fancy, but it's free and it's easy to use. Turning anything into charts or other visual help. And then those are all the tools that I have. And then here are some of the references that I've used throughout the sorry, these are the references that I used throughout the seminar. This is the book if you are looking for it, if you want to read more about it. It was a fantastic read. It's only like 120 pages. It has some really great exercises as well if you want to use those with your students or your children that can help them curate or help them cultivate these 5 skills. And then this is more if you want to learn about Kumbaya. And there's other creators as well that have really great videos that talk about the history of such like slave liberation songs, their hymnals and such. If you want to look them up as well. And then this is the Poetry Foundation website had the story about the road not taken as well. With that finally being said, please join us. July, we are taking July off for us as a company for the seminars. And so please join us for August 8th. Carrie, our founder and CEO, she is going to be doing a fantastic seminar about gaming with your family. If you're like me, I love gaming. Playing games with my family is something that I enjoy so much. And always knowing what games should I play with my family at what age and such. This is what she's going to be talking about, age-specific content and how to engage different ages into playing different levels of games. Really great seminar. I'm really excited to watch it. And Carrie is so knowledgeable about whatever she talks about. If she talks about something, she is going to have so much breadth of knowledge. So I highly suggest going to hers. It's going to be great. And again, thank you again. You can email us at any time at contact@respons-ability.net. If you have any questions about the other work that we do, you can contact us through here if you have any more questions about this seminar as well. And then our websites, respons-ability.net or digitalparenting.com, will give you more information, more pamphlets and flyers and other information that you can look at as well for other digital citizenship ideas. And then, yeah, and as you all know, you can join us for the free monthly seminars. And thank you all so much. I really do appreciate all the comments throughout. And sorry if I missed a couple of yours throughout. But I appreciate it, and it was a blast sharing this with you today.